On March 25th, 1911, Louis Waldman was sitting at one of the reading tables in the old Astor Library in New York. He recalled it was a raw, unpleasant day, and the comfortable reading room seemed a delightful place to spend the remaining few hours of the day with a book until the library closed. Quote, "I was deeply engrossed in my book when I became aware of fire engines racing past the building. By this time," this was a Jewish immigrant, he says, "I was sufficiently Americanized to be fascinated with the sound of fire engines. Tonight, I wish to discuss with you a mitzvah, a good deed, a Jewish act that you can perform while you are engaging in what is sometimes called retail therapy, also known as shopping. That's right, this is a shopping sermon. So I want to talk to you tonight about how to make good Jewish choices when you go out to buy a new blouse or suit or shoes or belt or tie or hair clips or whatever you want to get. And I want to say to you, first of all, some of you have been putting off going shopping for clothes because you don't like it. And some of you are looking for an excuse to go shopping for clothes because you love it. I have news for both of you. Jewish tradition commands that you go shopping this week. The Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Joseph Caro, writing in the 16th century in Tzfat, writes in Orach Chaim 529:2, for those of you who are keeping track and keeping score at home, he says, "It is an obligation to be joyful on holidays, especially Rosh Hashanah." I assume that's what Caro, he died before recording devices. I assume that's what he sounds like. Part of this joy, he states, is achieved, the joy of the holiday, part of the joy of the holiday is achieved through the purchase of new clothes and gifts. Especially, he says, especially clothes. And he continues that one should be as generous as possible with one's clothing budget. Quoth the Shulchan Aruch. He actually says a husband has to buy his wife a new dress, but I am updating the language, and you can sort that out among your own family systems, who buys what for whom. But this rule has been around at least since the time of the Mishnah, so we're talking about at least 1,800 years, a millennium before Caro was writing. But there's something implied in what the Shulchan Aruch and what Yosef Caro writes. There's a logic. Why spend so lavishly on clothes? And I read all sorts of commentaries on why he might say this. And the one I found most compelling was from Rabbi Ari Enkin, who was writing for the Orthodox Union's website. And I was interested to discover his explanation. And he said, "We are meant to infer that the more we beautify the holiday, the more we spend on clothes, the more good fortune we are buying for next year. And so your clothes budget is like a down payment on your good fortune, and you will be paid back many, many, many times over." Cool? Sounding good so far? All right, back to the guy in 1911 with the fire. All right, back in 1911, Mr. Walmond is running along. He's on his way. I ran out of the library. I ran to see what was happening because he wants to know, right, what's going on. And he saw people running towards an inferno to see what was up, and he followed them. And a few blocks away, the Ash Building on the corner of Washington Place and Green Street was ablaze. When he arrived at the scene, the police had thrown up a cordon around the area and firemen were helplessly fighting against the blaze. The 8th, 9th, and 10th stories of the building were now an enormous roaring cornice of flames. Word had spread through the east side by some magic terror that the plant of the Triangle Waste Company was on fire, and several hundred workers were trapped within. Horrified and hopeless and helpless, the crowds, I among them, looked up at the burning building and saw young woman after young woman approach the windowsill with the reddened, flame-filled window behind, pause for a terrified moment, and then leap and land as a mangled, bloody pulp on the pavement below. The Triangle Waste Factory fire went down in history as a moment when the Jewish community decided that ethics needed to be reapplied to the garment industry. Since the Industrial Revolution, it had been trending towards sweatshop conditions, because the demand for cheap clothing led to the cutting of corners, to brutal working conditions, and a lack of fire exits. And the owners of the factory were aware of these deficiencies, and they overlooked them. And in cartoons from the time, they are portrayed as holding the door shut and keeping the workers trapped inside. Today, 100 years later, little more than 100 years later, we go to buy clothing often because clothing is designed to last a single season and wear out. Some of you are chuckling. You can tell where I'm headed. The intersection of high fashion and bargain prices is what we call fast fashion. Fast fashion, like I said, is producing fashionable garments cheaply, quickly, at a low cost, garments that are intended to be worn only for a single season. Now you got to ask, Rabbi, why do we have seasonal fashions in the first place? Rabbi, why do we have... That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. Okay, the idea of fast fashion comes from the idea of seasonal fashion, which originates with none other than the Sun King himself, Louis XIV, King of France. Up until the reign of King Louis XIV, does anyone know where the center of fashion was in the world? It wasn't Italy, and it wasn't yet France. Does anybody know? No, not England. Spain! Who said Spain? 1,000 points. Spain is correct. Spain had been the center of fashion because it was the center of the largest empire for centuries, and Spanish fashion was known for being durable and long-lasting. And King Louis created a rule. He found a weak spot in his court, which he was trying to control. You see, King Louis had lots of people rising up against him, and his thing was like to calm down and take away the power of his rebellious nobles. And he did it in the following way. He created what is known as etiquette. And part of the etiquette, designed by himself and his brother, was that fashion needed to change every season in order to force, and all of the fashion had to be produced in France, and the patterns had to be vibrant, but it had to be replaced every season in order to force his aristocrats to spend down their money and reduce their power. It seems to me that the Torah, if asked to choose between the Spanish idea of fashion, durability, and King Louis's idea of fashion, the Torah would say the Spanish are correct. Why? Thank you. I'm glad you asked. Because this week in Parshat Nitzvaim Vayelech, Moses is giving his long-winded goodbye speech And he's reminiscing about the days when the people lived and worked and walked in the desert. And he says, I led you, he sounds like Joseph Caro, I led you in the desert for 40 years, and the clothes on your back did not wear out, and your sandals did not wear out. This, I believe, is not saying that we need to wear the same clothes for 40 years, but they'd smell pretty bad. But I do believe in days gone by there was a proverb that read or was said, buy cheap, buy twice. Recently, the Jewish website Hey Alma. Who are my Hey Alma fans? Anybody playing at home? Hey Alma? No? Okay. Hey Alma described a recent backlash to fast fashion. Slow fashion. This is a concept against fast fashion and its labor abuses and its environment, like it's very polluting, fast fashion. So slow fashion was championed by contemporary fashion experts like Cora Harrington, and it said that the cost of a fashion haul, is anyone familiar with the term haul? It's when you get a bunch of inexpensive stuff and you take what you want and whatever, and the stuff lasts, you wear it twice, and then it's gone. The cost of a haul of 10 pieces that will wear out within a season, Hey Alma says, for the same price, shoppers could choose not only ethically made pieces of clothing, not only sustainably made clothing, but clothing that will last for years and years and years. And Jewish tradition suggests that when making a clothing purchase, in addition to the price and the style, we should consider the supply chain and the dignity of garment workers, among whom some of us have ancestors who did that work. We should be aware of that. We should, in America, vote with our dollars. We vote with our votes, and in America we also vote with our dollars. And since we have to go shopping, what a burden! We ought to give some consideration to these issues as well. And I wish I could say that the Triangle Factory fire is behind us, 100 years behind us. But I want to share a story from 100 years later, from 2012. The Tazreen factory near Dhaka in Bangladesh. More than 200 people were injured when a fire broke out. At least 110 workers were killed, and at least 9 people died by jumping from the building. The Talmud, the Shulchan Aruch, and I think all of us would probably agree, it's very important to beautify the holiday and to beautify yourself in the process, because Jewish tradition says that this shopping, this holy shopping, should be a source of joy. And you may notice that your new rabbi, because he puts his money where his mouth is, has fewer suits and fewer shoes and fewer ties than you would expect in a rotation for someone in his position. Because rather than buy 10, he's buying 1. Because I want to do what Moses suggests and wear something that will last me at least 40 wears. I don't want to buy any clothing that will not last me to the 40th time I put it on. Because I believe, and Moses believes, and I think all of us when we talk about fashion also believe, that quality is better than quantity. So I would like to propose to you all that the highest form of fashion, as we all know, is to buck the trend and do the opposite of what the mainstream is doing. That is the essence of cool. Lisa Beth is shaking her fist. Anybody here was a fan of the Netflix show Emily in Paris? Okay. I want to update from King Louis XIV. Right, in that show they said Rangar is the new chic, meaning going against the trend is the height of cool. So this year, instead of buying 10 pieces of clothing that you'll wear once or twice, spend the same amount on a single garment that reflects ethical treatment of the workers, because you don't want your garment, you don't want to find out that what you bought was made in the Tazreen factory before it burned down. Ethical purchasing, quality, durable garments, not as much waste. And we should aim to feel that our clothing are like our second skin made out of our ethics. We want to look on the outside like our ethics feel on the inside. So, I declare positively and without reservation that more than 3 centuries after the death of Louis XIV, Zichrono Livracha, I guess, you should all feel comfortable wearing the same clothing to synagogue 2 seasons in a row. Happy shopping and Shabbat Shalom.